Hey, and welcome back to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. Hopefully you heard our special release that a couple days ago, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But this is going to be our normal episode, so if you're just in case you're confused. But with me, as always, is Fredo and Dave. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
And stupid Eagles. You know, that's all we're going to say is stupid Eagles. But by God, if I hear the words Hurts or Wentz anymore in the next week, I'm going to go postal. It was like, ugh. And limit the Saints talking stuff. The other thing that drove me crazy is that these announcers, sorry, everybody, the Saints lost to the Eagles. You knew that probably. But these announcers also were like, and there's number 56 and number 58 going after. And it's like they had no idea any of the Saints players' names. You know, it's like, but they just called numbers, but every Eagles player they had. So yes, they had their names down. So yes, I'm a disgruntled Saints fan right now, but okay, I'm better now. But, oh well.
Deep breath.
Yeah. But you know, it was going to happen. It was going to happen. There was a trap game coming somewhere. And this is like the RG3 game. You know, we made Jalen Hurts look awesome. We just, insured him a paycheck. So, but anyway, we're not here to talk about the Saints. We are the Who Dat Jedi podcast, but we're going to move on. We're here to talk about Star Wars, and tonight is going to be about the Mandalorian recent episode, The Believer. And it seemed like a short episode.
It was only about 38 minutes total, so not much longer than last week's short episode.
But still, it just seemed, I don't know. I don't know if it was just, it got to the point and maybe it just had so much action in it that I don't know. But last week's had a lot of action. It just seemed like when I'm thinking about, we're going to talk about this episode, there's like only really 2 or 3 things we need to talk about with this episode. You know, I don't know. It doesn't make it bad. It's just pretty succinct. But as always, we're going to start with trivia to get our brain wrapped around some Star Wars goodness. All right. Because the color matches your shirt, Dave. First one I look at, this one goes to you. And the color on the card, sorry. What creature causes C-3PO to shriek, "Go away, beastly little thing, shoo, shoo"? This is my favorite line from Empire, by the way.
That's your favorite line?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite lines. "Go away, beastly little thing, shoo, shoo."
Well, those are the Minox.
Yep. I just thought that was a great C-3PO line. I'm afraid of birds too, so that's probably another reason why I related to it. So yes, it was the Minox. I didn't even have to look on the back of that. All right, Fredo.
Mm-hmm.
Who informs Governor Tarkin that the Death Star has entered the Alderaan system?
Oh, crud.
Oh my God, that's Bush League compared to what Dave got. Dave's laughing. Yeah. He muted his microphone so he could laugh at you. I don't know. I
have no idea, honestly. I know who you're talking about, but I have no idea who that character is.
Man, I'm gonna guess General Taggy. Nope, it's Admiral Mahdi.
Yeah, that would have been my guess.
I have his action figure here somewhere. That was Bush League, man. That was tough. I'm sorry.
The only reason that I would have even had a guess in the first place is because I read From a Certain Point of View, A New Hope, within the last 6 months. So some of those characters' names are fresh in my mind.
So mine, what Gungan has distinctive green skin and prominent eyebrows?
Oh, cool.
Well, he muted himself so he could swear. I actually had an answer. Then the prominent eyebrows threw me for a minute, but I'm guessing that it's Boss Nass. Yeah, it's Boss Nass. We do our so part. So sorry, Fredo, you got hosed on trivia this week. By the way, the Bad Batch, okay, so we're skipping news for this episode because you just need to go listen to our previous episode that we released a couple days ago that goes over all of the Disney, the Disney investor call, all the things they announced about Star Wars and Marvel. So all the news is there for the most part. But let's talk real quick because one of you got the question about, I guess it was Fredo, about, it said who informed Tarkin. Grand Moff Tarkin is going to be in the Bad Batch. that looks really cool. And also, am I wrong, or is Fennec Shan in the Bad Batch?
Somebody took a screen grab and basically confirmed it. Like, there's Fennec right there.
Wearing the same helmet, but that's going to be Ming Na Wen is not that old. You know what I mean? Because I mean, if we're talking about Bad Batch is taking place between episodes 3 and 4, and Mandalorian, I mean, I don't know. Of course, maybe her. I don't know.
Well, as I said, I mean, we're presuming that she's human. That doesn't necessarily mean, she may not be. She may be a humanoid type species that ages differently. But it was very obviously I mean, her outfit very much. If you'd seen the previous week's episode of Mandalorian, and then saw this trailer for the Bad Batch, you went, it's exactly the same. So.
It's the exact same helmet and everything. Yeah, I mean, and they do a close up on her. I mean, it's like, yeah, I think they're trying to draw those connections. So that was pretty cool. So let's just dive right into the Mandalorian latest episode, The Believer.
Her face. Now I'm a believer.
Thanks, man. When that's stuck in my head at 3:00 in the morning, I'm calling you. All right. So do a quick little recap of this. We open up. If you remember at the end of last episode, Mando goes to Cara Dune and says, "Hey, I need to go find Mayfeld to break him out of prison because I need his help." And so we open up at this basically a scrapyard that Mayfeld is doing hard labor, and Cara Dune springs him. He's remanded to her custody, and she takes Mayfeld up to Slave One, where Boba Fett comes down the ramp, and he kind of freaks out a little bit. He goes, "Oh, I thought you were another guy." And then that's when Mando comes down. He and Mayfeld is sure that he's going to get wasted right there, but they're like, "No, we need your help." And so turns out that to find Moff Gideon, he needs to get to an Imperial terminal, and he just lists off a planet, and they're off to a planet. I can't remember the planet's name right now. Does anybody know right off the bat? It's really not important.
Morak.
Okay. Anyway, Morak. But anyway, there's a terminal there, and so they fly to Morak, and they're going to basically they hijack a semi-trailer, if you will. I mean, that's what they did. They hijack a truck, and it was kind of funny right here because they're trying to decide who's going to go with Mayfeld, because they don't want to send Mayfeld alone because he'll probably just go tell the Imperials on them all, and he'll, be a hero and be able to stay out of jail. Or, then they're like, well, we can't send Fennec Shan because she's wanted by ISB, and they would recognize her. And then he turns to Boba Fett and he's like, well, let's just say that they'd recognize my face. And that was a chuckle. That was a good chuckle because, yes, Boba Fett looks like Jango Fett, who looks like all of the clones. So it's Mando that has to go with him, but he's going to change into some stormtrooper armor. I mean, it was tank driver, armor or whatever. And so they're transporting this explosive material. And there's actually a really interesting kind of, as they're driving through this town, there's an interesting kind of conversation that Mayfeld is having with Mando about basically colonialism. It's anyway, he's trying to figure out why do you not take off your helmet, but you will get into this gear, and we're going to talk about that stuff later. But then all of a sudden, a bunch of pirates come swooping into town, a whomping and a whooping, trying to blow up all of these semi-trailers that are transporting all the explosives. And so Mando is fighting them off, and we find out that stormtrooper armor sucks and is not like wearing Beskar. But they make it to the Imperial stronghold, and actually it's kind of funny because TIE fighters swoop in to save the day. And did you guys feel like, yay? Wait a minute. We're cheering on yep. TIE fighters.
They get the big hero moment.
It was really
and then
odd.
Right after that, they get the hero's welcome as well from all the troops, and everyone's like, yeah, we're all on the good guys' side here.
So we're in the Imperial base and we're looking for the terminal, which happens to be in the officer's mess. And so, but Mayfeld realizes he can't go in and do it because his former commanding officer is in there. And so Mando says, I'll do it. But apparently you need facial recognition. So Mando's going to have to take off his helmet. Now, I have to read you guys. I'm going to pause for a second. I have to read you guys this text from my friend. He actually works in the government, but he says, let's see here. He says, also, what kind of Imperial software are we working with that any dude off the street can just have his face scanned and obtain information? But they needed Mando to take off his helmet for story reasons. But anyway, so we actually do see Pedro Pascal for the second time. And he took off his helmet so he could get scanned and then get the information of where Moff Gideon is. And then the Mayfeld's, former boss comes over, and then Mayfeld comes in to kind of save the day, and they end up sitting down. The officer doesn't know who either one of them is, but Mayfeld is getting worked up over all the things that this Imperial officer is saying about how, people that really don't know what's good for them, and the Empire is going to, cause all sorts of hell so that the New Republic looks bad and the Empire can take over again. And Mayfeld ends up shooting him. And so then they have to escape, and it's just kind of a big chase scene to get out. And but they eventually, get away. And the very last scene is we have a Mando sending a transmission to Moff Gideon using the exact words from, what was it, the second to last episode? Where he says, you have something that's very important to me. You have no idea how, it's that he just word for word from that last episode, and Moff Gideon looks scared. And so we're set up for the final showdown of this season. So that's kind of the recap, but watch it. It's a lot more enjoyable than me just spouting about it. I don't know, real quick, just around the horn. Did you guys dig this episode? What'd you think of it? Dave?
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, like you said earlier, it's very succinct and short and to the point. And I tend to like those episodes. I know that we get less we get less content, and so that's a bummer. But they're usually to the point for a reason. And it's usually more effective storytelling. And so, like 9 times out of 10, if it's a shorter episode, I kind of like roll up my sleeves and rub my hands together. All right, here we go. We're going to get something fun and interesting this week. And that was the case.
Fredo?
Yeah, on a first viewing, I mean, it's a very fun, action-heavy episode, another action-heavy episode. By the way, the pirates, they were just looking to blow them up. They never give you a reason why. They never say, because they're not trying to hijack their cargo. They're not trying to take over and knock them out. They're trying to blow them up. And, from what you hear from the officer afterwards, it's not that many who that make it all the way through. So clearly it's having an impact. But in terms, I love the first half. It's my primarily action. I love that the end is primarily action. I love the little moment in the mess hall between Mayfeld, the officer, and Din, just because it felt very much like Tarantino in Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah.
Very much. There's tension, and you know what's gonna break it, but you're hoping it doesn't. If it does, it's all gonna go to McClunky in a basket. So it was really good episode, fun episode. In terms of building towards the climax, I don't necessarily know if it did that. We'll have to see this upcoming week. But I love the way that that the episode flowed and set up.
Well, they did a better job. It makes more sense than the Frog Lady episode. You could see the arrow that's being drawn. I dug it. It is one of those where it's like, man, why didn't you? Some of these episodes are becoming. Why don't you just take the 2 shorter ones and make one longer episode? Just because the flow would make a lot of sense. But anyway, that being said, the thing I dug about this movie was how this episode is how it challenged your like preconceived notions, and even the actors that are in it, or the characters that are in it, because it's like I said, we are, going, hooray, TIE fighters are saving us, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, they tricked us into rooting for the Empire. And of course, but Mayfeld is setting you up, as they're driving there, basically saying, "Hey," and it's kind of the same speech that DJ gives Finn in, the Last Jedi. It's like somebody's ruling, somebody's being ruled, or as the Who said, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, type of a thing. So, but we get tricked into being, oh yay, the Empire's saving us, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, that was really weird. But then Cara Dune has her preconceived notions about Mayfeld, and at the end she lets him go because there's redemption there. Mayfeld has his preconceived notions about Din, and there is I guess what's the word I'm looking for? There's an understanding at the end of this episode between the two of them, so that relationship changes. So like I said, everything it's all about, almost, you could almost say the theme is from a certain point of view. It's challenging everybody's, and it also gets into the, this is the way, and we see Din taking off his helmet. So everything is, we're challenging all of our preconceived notions. And that's what I dug about it. And they did that in like 30 some minutes. So that was pretty cool. So what did we think about Mayfeld here? Dave, you have some thoughts that you jotted down. Why don't you kick off this part of the conversation?
Sure. Yeah. Well, he's this, similar to Frog Lady, when we talk about the Frog Lady episode. And again, I'm going to defend the Frog Lady episode forever. A, because I really dug that episode, but B, that our review of that particular chapter is the most listened to review that we've had this season. So, well, you get all your Frog Lady discussion here, everybody. This is where you go for Frog Lady discussion. But in the same way that she was kind of a reflection of Din as a parent, Mayfeld here is a reflection on Din and what he was in his past, right? And I really couldn't agree more with what you were saying, Aaron, about how everybody's expectations are getting sort of blown up in this episode. I can think of numerous examples in my own life where I think something about a person and I get it completely wrong, and vice versa. Somebody misjudges me. And it happens. Like, you think about like people you went to high school with, it's like, well, I remember you're the person that was into so-and-so, or this was something notable about your character. It was like, well, no, you don't get to define me in that way. And Mayfeld is so well developed as a character here. He's very gray and nuanced. He's not just a black and white caricature. That we get to see him challenge those expectations, but then, like you said, we get to see Din challenge them as well. And
you see,
it's a really cool thing.
And it was more powerful because Cara Dune was absolutely 100% anti-imperial, and she's seeing that, oh, okay, they can be a good guy, or people can change, people can be redeemed, I suppose. And that was interesting. So, Fredo? I'm sorry, yeah, Dave, keep going.
The one thing I was going to add to that, it was like, to me, it was the characterization, the little moments. He brought humor to the role, which you would expect. But, it helped throw a different spin on this sort of shady background character, right? Well, here's a person that knows how to get us into the facility and, has no no sort of moral compass that would keep him from doing that. He's gonna do it. There's no question. And yet he brings, the conversation you were talking about, the little things like where he's talking about, this is you could I could make assumptions about you, and you can make assumptions about me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where we're actually at.
Well, and it's also I saw this meme. Somebody, I can't remember who posted it. Maybe you, Fredo, you threw it in our group chat, but it was a picture of the stormtroopers saying, "Wait a minute, we put handcuffs on a child. Are we the baddies?" It's that old "Are we the baddies?" skit. It is. It's like, and it also gets into Anakin saying, "Well, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil." It's so, and I think that's what, like you said, Mayfeld being, kind of that gray area. I think he was probably all in on being an Imperial, and then he saw things that, it's like, wait a minute, this isn't right, and so, but then you see the New Republic doing some of the exact same things, so he's like, like I said, it's kind of like DJ saying, don't pick a side. Fredo?
Talks about having trouble sleeping at night.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think what's interesting is this. If you remember the episode where we met last season, we got none of this. This is all written and put into this episode now, which is an interesting choice because it would have been interesting to say, because I don't think we know that he was a former Imperial officer of some kind.
No, we knew he was an Imperial sharpshooter. Yeah.
Right, but other than that, they didn't say anything else. And you figure, okay, Empire falls, he's just becoming like so many, trying to make his way through the galaxy. But the idea that, he was involved, and I love the fact, side note, that they dropped in the Operation Cinder reference, because that's a Battlefront 2 reference. That's the whole idea of the Emperor's master plan of, if I can't have the galaxy, well, I'll just burn it all to the ground. Which kind of scary that he still has officers out there still willing to live and die by that creed, even though he's been long dead. But so we didn't get into all this backstory on Mayfeld at all in the last episode because he was primarily a foil for Mando.
Yeah.
He and his guys were going to at some point betray Mando. Therefore, we couldn't know that about him. Now that he's on the same side, and now that we know Mando, Din, and we're getting juxtaposed with all these different points of view, it's a wonderful presentation that he does to say, look, the villagers and more, they don't care whether it's the Republic or whoever. We're just invaders. We're in their home, strip mining it for its resources, and they don't care what side we're claiming to be, which is why it's intriguing that first they gave us that big hero moment with the TIE fighters and the stormtroopers at the end of the truck run, but then also then they give us the Imperial officer, which, by the way, his name is Valen Hess, where he starts talking about, burning Khan and turning an Operation Cinder, and now they're going to take that Rhydonium and do even worse stuff with it. And so you can kind of get the view of Mayfield, like, wait a minute, I want to help Mando, but I also didn't sign up to create more destruction and chaos. Like it says, he has to live with himself every night, and
well, and also
it's an interesting dynamic.
From a story perspective, he, Mayfeld is also, creating even more conflict within Din about, the different ways of the Mandalorian,
Big time.
Because,
Big time.
Just by saying that like, there are, we're all the same is what he said, just you can say what you want, but when it comes down to it, we're all the same. And I think that hits with Din, that it's like, okay, yeah, the armorer and, the children, the children of the watch, and then, the night owls and, Boba Fett and, all these different, I think we've been talking about it on every podcast. He's figuring out that, all right, so we're all kind of on the same team. We're just wearing different jerseys.
And it's easy to say, wait a minute, this is the way, and therefore I will do this every time. And I love the fact that Mayfield's the one that introduces this idea. And it's like, no, there's going to be a moment where your creed is going to run against something that you need vitally. And in this case, that's the location of the child. And so at that moment, how much does your creed matter? And, because that's a question that gets presented to every hero in every story, gets presented to every person. At some point, you know, there's your beliefs and there's the reality that you have to do certain things in order to accomplish your goals. And where are you going to bet? Or where are you going to? So it's interesting.
One of the things that I love about Star Wars so much is this question of, do the ends justify the means? And Star Wars always has a way of traditionally has very much answered that question in the negative. It's like, if we do what our opponent is doing, we become them in a very literal way. When you think about the dark side and you think about Luke and his failure in the cave, and it becomes where you draw a line. It's like, I cannot engage in the sort of tactics that my enemy does, and because if I do, I'm doomed. And yet, the modern Star Wars stories that have been most successful, and I would kind of tend to lump this episode in with that. Rogue One, like, very gray. And it's not necessarily spouting a belief or a course for a person, right? I think, like, sometimes Star Wars does that for people. It's like, well, this is the way that I should be. I should be like Luke Skywalker.
Well, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but throughout history, terrorism always depends on what side you're on. Because the American Revolution, boy, the Americans were doing guerrilla warfare. It was terrorism, textbook terrorism, but they were on the right side, so we're okay with that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Rogue One. That was pretty much terrorism that they were committing, but it's okay because they were on. So I see what you're saying there. It's like, it's again, from a certain point of view.
Yeah, the stuff with Cassian where he shoots the informant in the back, this is kind of saying, oh my, here we are in a different corner of this galaxy. And I think for a lot of fans, it's really exciting to go there, because Star Wars traditionally has been very moralistic and it's been, pretty black and white. Like, if you take the time to look at it under a microscope, you realize the rebels are the bad guys in modern parlance, like, because if it's if you're thinking about it from, like, okay, so, like, what's going on, what's really going on here, and if it's a commentary on the Vietnam War, A New Hope was, it's like, well, the empire is us, is the United States,
mm-hmm.
And the insurgents are, the people in Vietnam. And so it's like, it flips it on its head, and it does it in a way that you don't realize that they're doing it. And I love that about it. And I've always loved that about it. And at least when I was old enough to understand that. But like you said, taking it at face value, it's like, okay, black and white, good, evil. It's very easy to understand. And so, like, I think for a lot of us, as we've aged with Star Wars over the years, I'm in my 40s now. I want a more grown-up version of Star Wars. I don't want something quite so dualistic. I want something a little more refined, or a little more subtle. These grayer stories, Rogue One, this one, are really interesting, because, like, what you said is exactly right. Like, Din doesn't care about these explosives getting into the hands of the Imperials. Like, his goal is to get the information and get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what are they going to do with that? They're going to go harm people. It's like, there's a moral choice to be made here, and he didn't care about that.
But Mayfeld takes that shot at the end.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, that was the interesting thing. And again, it was kind of like yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Mando is saying this is not my fight. You know, I just have, this is what I'm focused on. But Mayfeld was like, hey, we're here. This is my fight. And you know,
but I also think in part that's related to the fact that Mayfield's seen what that can do. He's seen the other end of it. He's seen what the Rhydonium and the weapons that it can create in the hands of the Empire, what it leads to. And it leads to more death and misery and destruction and chaos. And, you know, the Valen has Imperial officers talking to him about how people want order. And you're like, you're going to create order out of blowing planets up? You know, so there's the juxtaposition of what they state versus what they do. And in order for us to have order, we have to, destroy all these planets and kill all these people. Then they'll know we need to have order. Like, that's not the way it works. And Mayfield's the one who's seen it. Din hasn't. Din's been on the other end from the Clone Wars aspect, from the Separatists, from their droids, but he hasn't seen what the Empire can do beyond when they're chasing him. So it makes sense that it would be Mayfeld who's having the more emotional reaction at that moment.
The CEO, I mean, like chef's kiss, that guy, because like here we are having all these sorts of philosophical debates with ourselves, like should we have been rooting for these TIE fighters to come in and save the day, etc. And this guy's like the smarmiest, grossest, most evil CEO you could ever encounter.
By the way, did you know that that's the same actor who played the Night King on Game of Thrones?
it was, yeah, and he also killed Batman's parents in Batman Begins.
That's right.
It was Joe Schill.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's talk. I'm skipping around kind of the order here, Dave. But let's talk about because the biggest thing that happened on this episode, and it's what we've been talking about on our podcast, is Mando making a choice. And boy, howdy, did he make a choice! And like I said, when he took off his helmet, technicality, he took off a stormtrooper's helmet, not his Mandalorian helmet in front of somebody. But still, he showed his face. I'm just being kind of dork there. But so he did make a choice about his creed versus, the caring of the child. You know, he took his helmet off in front of everybody and then sat at a table. And what I found so cool about that from the get-go after he took his helmet off was how uncomfortable Pedro Pascal acted and looked. I mean, he was the most vulnerable of anybody you've ever seen in Star Wars. And
he was stiff.
It was like his superpowers were taken away. He was frozen at that table. I don't know so obviously taking off the helmet, like I said, it's choice, but it's also, again, it's opening himself up and being a more vulnerable human being, I suppose. But Dave, what was your thoughts of when he took off the helmet?
Oh yeah, I mean, like this is like you could probably write a graduate thesis on this because it's like the point of the show, basically. Because the literal thing, like you've got to be able to take off your helmet at some point, just from a practical sense, but also just like what it means to the character. It's like, are you choosing one path? Are you choosing a different path? And it's like, are you choosing, father, guardian of this being who needs your help? Or are you choosing, strict dogmatic soldier, which is something else entirely? And it's like he's having to come to terms with that and decide for himself. It's like, can I have it both ways? Maybe can I do a little bit of both? Can I make compromises? And those sorts of choices become important as we go through this. But like this literal moment, like you're right, the acting by Pedro Pascal is amazing. So like you can read it two ways. You can read it like you said, he is not comfortable because he's so vulnerable, because this is not where he wants to be, and it's so awful for him that he literally can't even like move from side to side without, he can't turn his head. The other side of it is like, I sort of thought like he's used to playing the character that way too. It's like I'm wearing the helmet always, and I'm just constantly kind of stiff in my movements because I'm constantly in the armor. So I read it that way as well, which is kind of a fun thing. But you know, it's it was really significant for all those reasons, but also just the fact that you that's like the worst way you could have your face shown, essentially, for him. It's like not only that you've shown it, and had you willingly removed your helmet in the way that it's not supposed to be done, but scanned your features into a database so that that's presumably on file somewhere for the Empire now to use against you in the future. You've basically given your likeness away to your opponent. And I just feel like, yeah, the way he played the rest of that scene is like kind of like him going, oh, oh McClunky, 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 what did I do, McClunky?
Yeah.
The way I equated it was kind of like, you know, everybody has that nightmare at one point in their lives about standing naked in their classroom and freaking out because they don't know what, you know, how to react or how everybody's going to react. So in many ways, because that in some ways is how Din is feeling at that moment. He's naked in front of the world. He has gone his entire life wearing that helmet and not having anybody see his face. And at that moment, he comes to the crossroads of, if you want Grogu back, you're gonna have to take your helmet. It's gonna have to be scanned, and then on top of that, he's trying to get out of there as quickly as he can because he's like, okay, maybe if nobody saw it, it doesn't count. Kind of like when he takes the helmet off, he's by himself and he's eating. But then the Imperial officer turns around, and then Mayfield has come into his rescue because he's just frozen stiff. He, you know, in some ways, he knows he's violated the central code that's dictated so many of his actions for the bulk of his adult life. And now he doesn't know what to do. And that's why he's just so stiff and quiet in that interaction. I don't think he says a word while Mayfeld and Val and Hess are talking to one another. He doesn't even have a reaction until Mayfeld pulls out the gun and shoots Hess. And his reaction is more of a bug eyed, like, what the heck did you just do? So I think it was excellently acted by Pedro Pascal. You would expect so. But totally seeing his features, everything, all his emotions that he's going through. It's a roller coaster for him. Those, 5 minutes?
So let's remember the rumors that we heard of how, you know, he was, you know, unhappy about not being able to show his face and how he was, he wasn't going to be in as much in the back half of the season. So all those we can kind of put to rest, right? But I do want to say this about what you guys have been saying about, you know, and what we've all been saying about, you know, this sect of the Mandalorians think this, and this sect thinks this, and this clan over here thinks this. You know, honestly, I keep thinking about, you know, my own, I suppose, religious journey, you know, raised in, you know, in one church, moving to another church. And that was a, you know, that wasn't just something like, all right, yeah, I'm going over here now. You know, it was a tough, and I kind of sat in that new church a little bit, you know, kind of, you know, like kind of like Din a little bit, like, wow, really, you know, didn't just really uncomfortable. So, you know, so I think there's a, you know, a broader story that they're telling here of, you know, like I said, people's spiritual journey, or just, you know, groups that you belong to. You know, we're in New Orleans. Let's take it on a very, you know, not a serious of a side, I suppose, but, you know, we've got how many Mardi Gras crews? You know, why do you belong to one crew and not another? You know, because you like these rules better than another, or these people fit more of your, you know, what you're looking for, you know. So, you know, Din's on this, he's very immature. and he's having now to think for himself instead of having others think for him. And this is the first, now we're, the choices that he's been making these last couple episodes are he's making up his own mind. It's not the guild telling him to go get something. It's not the armorer saying this is the way. He's making his own way. So
he's on his hero's journey in a way, and we talk about that storytelling device for Star Wars in general. It's just you see that time and again with with Luke and Rey and everyone, and here it's like that. I'm leaving the village. I'm going to go get in adventures and grow as a human being. Return to the village to save the village, but understand at that point that I'm no longer really a part of that village. And I really think that's where he's headed.
There's something else about this, just from let's get out of the story for a second. And this is maybe cynical Aaron again, but I often try to read into why they're doing certain things, because something that struck me was there was no Baby Yoda in this episode. Not one, even like quick cutaway to, no Baby Yoda. So what do you think that it was like, we've got to create an episode without Grogu, and we're going to see if the ratings hold up or if people really complain to see if this idea can keep going without, the cute puppet every episode.
Can I say that I think the choice to not have Baby Yoda or Grogu for the child is more by design because of the story. By which I mean, you want to present a situation. What is driving Din Djarin right now? The absence of Grogu. He's lost his child. His child is nowhere near him.
And you're right. Of course, this whole episode, we don't know if he's okay. We don't know if he's
what happened to him, where he's at, if they're poking needles in him, if they're sucking him, what they're doing to him.
But it is But it is a two birds, one stone type of a thing, because you can do that to propel the story. But then also, it's like I said, this is unless we're going to have, like I've always said, BJ and the bear. They got to see if this is going to be able to fly without the cute puppet. And Fredo's frozen. We got to get a screenshot of that.
No, I'm not frozen. No, but I don't. No, actually, what I was I don't necessarily think so, because they keep mentioning the child all the time. It's interesting. His presence is voiced by the others. His presence is felt in Cara Dune's choice to spring Mayfeld. The fact that Mayfeld goes, the little green guy's missing, and he understands where Mando's coming from. The fact he tells him at the end, I hope you get your kid back. So the child's presence is here, but it's glaring because he's technically not there. So I think in some ways that's the design of the story, but also because at this point, I don't think you can have Mandalorian. No, you can have Din Djarin without Grogu. You've made it clear. If he's willing to take his helmet off for him, he's willing to do whatever it takes. I don't think they get split up anymore once they get back together.
Well, Aaron, one of the things that you were talking about early on in this season was that the stories aren't quite as concise as they had been, or at least as our impression of them had been. An individual chapter was a whole chapter, and it was self-contained. And the early part of this season, you'd have like not a post-credit scene, but a scene tacked on that was like more connective tissue. And so it makes me wonder if they're setting us up for perhaps a cliffhanger, which we're the easy assumption to make is that he gets his kid back in the final episode of the season. But what if he doesn't? What if there's a giant cliffhanger because they know season 3 is coming? I would allow for that. I wouldn't have thought that that would have been a storytelling direction they would have gone just because of the format of the show a year ago at this time.
For crying out loud,
But
we left people hanging for 3 years as to whether or not Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father. You know, was that a lie? You know, so you could totally end on a cliffhanger. But the problem, you know, I'm not saying it's a problem, but you're going to have to wait until next December, you know, because that's when season 3 is coming out. I mean, usually you just have to wait from May until it, like normal TV shows, you know, if the season ends in May, you just have to wait until September, you know.
yeah, I mean, but that's to your point, Aaron. Like, do we need to get used to the idea of these two being separated? Like, I think the assumption is we're going to get them back together again, and everything's going to be great, and we're going to go back to our comfort zone.
So,
And well, it may not happen until next December.
so getting back to the Mayfeld thing, have we seen the last of Mayfeld?
No.
I think it's kind of Bush League that they leave him on this deserted planet. You know, they could have given him a ride somewhere if they're going to let him go. You know,
No, it's not deserted. There's people there, the villagers that we saw.
Well, but I mean, it's not like they're just, you know, unless he goes back to the
Space
Imperial
Baron.
facility to, you know, steal a TIE fighter. I mean, he's pretty much stranded. I mean,
Well, he might want that in order to let the lie that Cara Dune's going to spread about his passing kind of take hold. Because
They
if
have
he's just,
more.
yeah, he's got to give at least, okay, everybody thinks I'm dead now. I can come out and somebody calls me Mayfield. I'm like, I don't know who that is. So
They have more plausible deniability, so it makes sense from their perspective. But also for him, like he's probably just thankful to get out of there. Who knows? Maybe he wants a quiet life as a villager somewhere. I don't know.
so you don't think we see him in the final episode?
hmm.
We're
No,
done with
but
him this season.
I think we're done this season. But I think he will turn back up eventually.
Now, another thing that was very interesting. Did you guys notice Boba Fett?
Boba Fett. Boba Fett. Where?
Got a new paint job.
He finally cleaned up the armor.
Right?
He didn't do that in the original trilogy, but he finally got it back. And he's like, man, Cobb Vanth really did a number on this and scuffed it up.
Now, I didn't even bother to look. Is the dent still in the helmet?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
So I don't know why that just strikes me as something we need to talk about a little bit. Why do you think I mean, why not leave it scummed up? Or is it, you know, because like you said, in Empire, it didn't look all that spiffy. And, you know, in Jedi, it didn't look all that spiffy. And now all of a sudden it's like, you know,
Maybe
hold on, guys. I gotta, you know, my 501st, you know, membership is coming up for renewal, and I've got to make sure that my armor looks up to specs. I don't know. It just was odd. It was odd to me.
maybe it's just a question of now that he's got it back, he values it at a different level. Who knows? It's interesting. I mean, we haven't gotten any further stuff from Boba Fett since the previous episode, but it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's part of his identity,
and I know
so it's interesting that he picks it up.
And I know you guys probably like, why the hell did he bring this up? But it's one of those things that something that it's so glaring, it catches your eye so much, it makes you wonder what was the creative decision to do that. Because they could have just as easy used the same armor from the, you know, week before, but they made a conscious decision that no, he's going to wear more cleaned up. It's going to be a fresh paint job and everything's going to look all brand new and spiffy. Why? You know, and maybe we're not going to come up with the answer between the three of us, but it's one of those things that when I'm watching these things, it's like, wow, that's okay. Okay, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I at the risk of reading too much into it, if Din's journey is to move away from the armor, Boba's journey might be moving toward the armor. You know, he was been without it. He got it back. I think he values it more. I think that's an easy assumption to make, but maybe he's sort of embracing these Mandalorian ways more. Like a nice callback. It probably doesn't mean a whole lot in this regard, but it sort of reinforces it a little bit. He's busting out seismic charges.
I was just going to ask, did you guys geek out over that? That was,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, when that happened, I was like, "Ooh, right on, cool!" It was like, and then they used the same same sound effect, and it was like, So yeah, I guess I liked Attack of the Clones a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that's a fun fan moment, hugely awesome. Like, oh yes, yes, but does that kind of tie in? Like he's spreading his wings a little bit at this point. He's back in his comfort zone. He's flying Slave One around in the Mandalorian armor. I think he's sort of self-actualizing, and it's sort of in a different way than Den is going. Den is moving away from the armor. He's moving towards this custodian role. He's like, do I need to be wearing this thing? I still feel uncomfortable with it off, but I guess I didn't die.
And that's why I still, like in our previous, special episode, I said the Rangers of the New Republic, unless they're if they're, like I said, the X-wing pilots who are, or if or marshals or whatever, trying to keep order, they've got to have somebody that is an antagonist. And so to me, it kind of makes sense if Fennec Shand is, wanted by both the Empire and the New Republic, and Boba Fett is Boba Fett. I could really see them being a part of that show, because it doesn't seem right now he's just kind of the driver of the van, but it does seem to be setting up another series.
Well, and I think from the standpoint of kind of like what Dave was saying, self-actualizing, he's reclaiming elements of his identity. I mean, to the point that in this episode he says, "Oh, they might recognize me," when he's talking about the Imperials. When at no point in case whooping and whooping on stormtroopers on Tython, nobody said, "Oh crap, McClunky, it's Boba Fett." Nobody said that. But now that he's reclaimed his armor, now that he feels back to being himself, he's actually concerned about people actually recognizing him.
Is it from a creative standpoint, is it trying to communicate to us that he is clean, upstanding, honorable, good guy? Because, we talk about preconceived notions, or maybe are they trying to do a bait and switch on us? Because we talked about preconceived notions and prejudices earlier. People will see somebody wearing a suit and saying, "Oh, they're a good guy and they're a fine, upstanding person." Then they'll see somebody wearing torn up jeans and a hoodie and say that they're, a punk, and they're going to, but it could be the exact opposite. So are they trying to woo us into, or are they trying to say that, hey, look at this guy, he's cleaned up. That means he's renounced his old, bounty hunter ways, and I'm sorry we're spending so much time on this, or is it again trying to, let's put him in a suit so everybody thinks he's a good guy, so that it'll be more effective when, he turns on everybody?
Could be either, and it could be effective either way. And I like that they are sort of going down that road with him. It's like, okay, so we're setting him up a certain way, which is a drastic departure from everything that we previously understood about him. That's interesting in and of itself, and that's enough. And so if we get that, that's great. But if they're setting us up, and if there's a turn heel coming, that's awesome too. And what I love most about him is like he's complicated, and like we're finally, he's back as an interesting character. I'm not sure he was ever this interesting, to be honest. Even the Clone Wars stuff, when he's trying to get revenge on Mace Windu and whatnot, that's sort of predictable. Here, I don't know where he's going. I don't know what his end game is.
Well,
and
he said, I give my allegiance to no
No
one.
one.
So, yeah, I mean, so what I think they're telling us that, yeah, hold on, because you don't know what's when you think you don't know. So the title of the episode was The Believer. Why? Who is the believer? We know who the Jedi. Well, we talked about the Jedi could have been Ahsoka or it could have been Grogu.
Mhm.
Who is the believer?
I think it's Din. I think this episode was about challenging his belief system. As most of the season has been about challenging his belief system. So the idea of belief at this point, what is he willing to believe on? What is he willing to stand on? And I think he's coming to a realization that he's willing to believe on is his love for Grogu. That's so in order to protect that and defend that, he's gonna do whatever it takes.
I think it all depends on who is writing these chapter titles. I mentioned it earlier in earlier podcasts. Is it some third person, all knowing, author, or is it Din writing in his journal? And so if it's Din writing in his journal, the believer, um, well, first of all, I think if it's that third person, all knowing, I think the believer could be Mayfeld. It could be Cara Dune. It could be Din. It could be the Imperial officer. Everybody's beliefs were challenged, and confirmed or changed. They were all challenged at that point. If it's Din, writing this, then I think it's probably I'm struggling between either Mayfeld or the Imperial officer, but the Imperial officer was the one who seemed to be more firm in his beliefs, and then
But that's kind of the point is you have Din with his belief system, you have Valen has the Imperial officer with his belief system. You have somebody like Mayfeld who used to believe in the Empire but doesn't anymore. He's lost that faith whatsoever. And then you have characters like Cara Dune who believes that the New Republic is the way to go and that Mayfeld's a bad guy because he's an Imperial. And all of a sudden her belief system's challenged by Mayfeld's actions. So at every instance, there's a number of people here that could be attributed to where you could say, oh, they're the believer, or this is what they're believing on, and here's where that's coming to a head of the other characters. I mean, even pirates, you could say they're because they're sacrificing themselves to blow themselves up.
I think if you're thinking about it in a technical perspective, like what makes the most sense? Who's the main character of the episode? Or the main guest star, I guess, would be how I would call that. Yeah, probably Mayfeld. But like he's the least believing out of all of them. In a way, he's sort of just he believes in himself, and that's kind of where he's at in the in this giant scheme that they've wrapped themselves up in. So yeah, I like Cara Dune as the answer because she seems to have the most faith that this whole scenario is going to unfold the way that it should, and it does. I'm sure Din believed it as well. I'm sure he believed it very strongly, but I don't know. It's an interesting question because like most of the titles that we've been given, you can answer it a lot of different ways.
But there's always one that's very simple to draw the arrow to. Like I said, it's like I said, you go to the Jedi, it's like, on the surface, yes, it's about, Ahsoka, but it could be about, so here though, it's not as clear.
I mean, probably you would assume Mayfeld, I guess, because he's the starring character who isn't Din.
But of course, let's put it this way: who is the one of all these people that we're talking about, the ones who was most unwilling or probably unable or not gonna change their way of thought?
The Imperial.
Right. So he is the believer because he believes one way, and that's just the way it's going to be. Mayfeld changed his thoughts, like we said, changed his thoughts about the Mando, and we know that he changed his thoughts about the Empire. Cara Dune changes her thoughts about and her beliefs about Mayfeld, and basically probably about Imperials in general. Din obviously changed his, challenged his own beliefs. So, but and changed some of them. So I think the believer is probably the Imperial officer. It's the one that he is the one that wasn't budging, and look what it got him. He ain't no more.
Is that a commentary on belief?
Well, I think I think it's a and what this series has shown is there's a difference between believing in something um and being a zealot. That um you can believe in something but allow for flexibility. you know
Because if you look at it from the standpoint of whether it's Valen Has or Moff Gideon, what are they willing to do for their beliefs? Anything and everything, including wholesale destruction, murder, baby kidnapping, you name it.
and it's not even their beliefs, it's somebody else's beliefs.
Right? They just somebody else's beliefs that granted them power, and they just parrot the line in order to keep that power.
Well,
But
it's like it's like one of the things I always told my my students. I said, this is not a democracy, it's a benevolent dictatorship. Which and and other things, it's like you have classroom rules, but there's always extenuating circumstances. I mean, yeah, it's and so I just totally took another turn. But it's like, okay, so you could be speeding, speed limit says 35 and you're going 55, and a cop pulls you over, says, hey, you're not supposed to be going 55. It's like, you know my wife's in the car and she's in labor. Oh heavens to Murgatroyd, let me put on the reds and blues and I will lead you to the hospital and you will get no ticket. So yeah, it's against. So but the Empire doesn't operate that way. It's it's my way or the highway. The Emperor, Operation Cinder. If I'm dead, then you lay waste to everything. you know so I guess, with long story short, to me the believer is that Imperial officer. And I think it's another thing to show Din that, okay, yeah, just having one narrow vision of how to operate is not doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
right, but yeah, no, it create it's again it's juxtaposing Din's journey with other people, other characters' journeys, because they're all at different paths or they're at different points on his path. Somebody like Miggs believed until he came face to face with the Empire did, lost his beliefs, lost his faith, went off to do his own thing, ended up in jail. And it's not until it starts doing the right thing or the good thing that things kind of turn around. Whereas somebody like Cara Dune, who was lost from her own beliefs, came back around and now she's the authority figure, so to speak. So showing Din that there's more than one path to get to where he wants to go.
Right on.
Yeah, I honestly think, yeah, well, no, yeah, no, it's all right. We'll just move on. I could lead us down a very controversial path, and I'm just not going to do that tonight. But but the writers of the story are making a broader comment about, again, belief system, especially in this hyper political world that we live in. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and how it's either, and we we're all on Twitter, and we see It a lot of on both the right and the left. It is, to some people, it's like you're either all in or you ain't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, shades of gray, like we've talked about before. There are, some beliefs that you can take from, all walks of life. And I think the show is speaking more broadly, to that. Um,
Yeah,
anyway,
I mean that might be ultimately the point of this episode. You call it the believer, and you show us this character who has a fervent belief and doesn't get that belief challenged until he takes a blaster bolt in the chest. Um, but you've got Din on this journey of encountering all of these different people from different walks of life and beginning to understand that there are different ways that he can live his life, different ways he can be a good guardian to Grogu. And the fact that you get presented this one rigid guy and he gets blown out of his shoes.
but
I think
if you think about it, the first line we ever hear from him in season 1 is, "I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold." It was very, binary, and we've now seen him go through the galaxy and experience life, like you said, and realize that things aren't, "I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold." And again, I think he's maturing, and yeah, so
yeah, the episode written in a way mirrors his growth, because we talked about this episode kind of being a gray episode because of its focus on Mayfeld as a gray character, and how Rogue One it takes cues from Rogue One in that way in a lot of ways. It just it feels interesting to me that he's on this very conflicted path, but he's beginning to see a broader view of the galaxy, and the rigid, small-minded viewpoint is not the point anymore.
so let's talk about some other nerdy things. We mentioned the seismic charges. That was awesome. Also, I really dug seeing shore troopers, from Rogue One. You mentioned that's a set of armor that I would love to have. That was really cool. Um, any other geeky moments did you notice? Any
Trying to think of.
callbacks? Anything that made you go, "Oh, that was from this thing," or "That was from this thing over here"?
Well, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say right quick. I found it interesting that we opened the episode on an Imperial scrapyard, where Mayfeld's helping to break down all Imperial tech and ships and whatnot. Because if you play Jedi Fallen Order, that's where that game starts. You start at a planet where your character is helping to break down old Clone Wars era, ships and tech in order to be repurposed. So it seems like that's always a good way to, in the aftermath of a giant galactic civil war, to make ends meet. Go scrap down.
Yeah, it was a very eerie sort of environment too. So in one sense, you begin to wonder: is the New Republic just this wonderful place when they've got these people here imprisoned against their will, doing manual labor, presumably unpaid manual labor, um, and it also calls to mind, like, where all those materials end up eventually, because they didn't have really. I guess they had a smallish fleet that got blown up on Hosnian Prime or whatever, but it seems like there was a lot of Imperial material on that scrapyard there that they could have gone to some ships and stuff, and it didn't.
I also wonder if it says a lot about the New Republic that they're using prisoners, but also their goal is to wipe away as much of the stain of the Empire as they can. Rather than taking their tech and repurposing it, now we're just going to wipe it clean. We're just going to, take it back down to its component parts and then start from scratch.
Well, and there's obviously a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done. So, yeah. So those of you who listen to our podcast, if you noticed any Easter eggs, want to share them with us on Twitter, stuff like that. Like I said, I think the seismic charge was the coolest bit. And also it was also neat to see how Slave One on the inside works, because Slave One lifts off horizontally and then flies vertically, and you see it rotate inside. I mean, those are just attention to details that, like all of us wondered, how the heck does this thing work? How does people not fall all over the place when they're flying in Slave One? Well, they told us. So, so I like that attention to detail. Yeah. Anything else for the good of the order on this episode? Or where do you think we're obviously next week we're probably going to be trying to spring Baby Yoda, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting because I haven't seen anything yet about episode run. I would imagine it would be longer than 38 minutes.
And can I say something real quick? We talked about the handcuffs on Baby Yoda. I think that's Mandalorian tech. Because think about at the end, the last season of the Clone Wars, they have Maul in a box basically that keeps him from using the Force.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Ahsoka and Bo-Katan have a little back and forth about it. And she said, yeah, this is one of the last, because they had these things for Jedi. So Moff Gideon has something to do. I mean, he has the Darksaber, and then you have these Force handcuffs. There's more of a Mandalorian story there with him than just he was at the battle of
Tanab, which is another little
that was another little
wonderful...
callback. Yep. But anyway, like I said, I just wanted to throw that out there about I think that's Mandalorian tech. So.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I think it's an interesting. Now, I love the fact that the episode ends with Din calling Moff Gideon out, because it would have been interesting if they had decided to kind of go and being sneaky, quiet, try to spring Grogu out. But no, they're in some ways, he's getting Din is challenging at the heart of Moff Gideon's power, which is his ability to kind of, be a step ahead, be smarter than the guy, and have all the reasons. The Empire that is still in its control, and he's saying, "Yeah, bring all that. I'll take you on." So, wonder what plan Din has up his sleeve in order to take on Moff Gideon now.
Well, cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll. Hearing the silence, we'll probably leave it at that. Like I said, this episode didn't have a whole lot of things we need to talk about. It was pretty straight to the point, and there was one kind of really big theme that was going through the whole episode. So, and again, I'm not going to rate it as far as, my favorite or anything like that, because I got to see how it fits in the whole story, but it seemed to make sense. So, Dave, where can people find us?
People can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn and Alexa, Amazon Music and Audible, and they can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Yeah,
and tell your friends if you like the podcast, let them know, and they're a Star Wars fan, let them know about it. And if you want to throw some positive ratings our way, I suppose everybody asks for that. We always like positive feedback. But otherwise, and don't forget, we usually just release one episode per week, but we have a special episode we just released a few days ago that was going over all of the Marvel and Disney announcements. So please check that one out as well. But until then, I suppose we will say who dat?
Who dat?
Yep.
And let's hope we do better with the Chiefs than the Eagles.
Yikes.
Yeah. And let's hope Green Bay loses. So, but otherwise, we will see you guys later. McConkey.